Hey, it's Liz D'Alto, and this is the Untamed the Wild Soul Woman podcast. From body image, sex, spirituality, money and relationships, to motherhood, creativity, business, communication, and desire, Untamed the Wild Soul Woman is the place to come for real stories and powerful advice to help you reclaim and redefine womanhood in the 21st century. What's up, Wild Ones? Welcome to episode number 169 of the Untamed the Wild Soul podcast. I'm your host, Elizabeth D'Alto, and today we have Abiola Abrams with us. I loved this conversation and have a feeling you will too. Abiola is absolutely magnetic and generous. We ran the gamut in this one on all kinds of sensitive topics, from color blindness and political correctness to spirituality, rage, activism, and staying informed during these interesting times that we live in. We talked about keeping an open mind, abundance, African goddesses, culture, and more. Her breadth of knowledge and experiences was super valuable, and she offered both perspectives we've explored before on the show and some that we haven't. So there's so much juicy, interesting stuff in here, and I was so grateful for her openness and willingness to go there on some areas where I personally really wanted to explore some things that I didn't know, or that I did know I didn't know, rather. This is a great one to share with your friends to help open up conversations that are not easy to have but unavoidable. So enjoy this one. The show notes can be found at untameyourself.com/episode-169. And our weekly service reminder: if you're listening to iTunes and you have not yet left a review for the show, please head on over there and do that. We love to know how the show impacts you, what you get out of it, how long you've been listening, and also it helps other women and men just like you who listen in and get the insights, and it really helps them, which we hear from you all the time on social media. Helps in iTunes to list that out too when people are searching for new shows and new things to find, new things to listen to and enrich their lives. So thank you so much for that, and let's get into it. Today with Abiola Abrams, who I have to tell you guys, I don't even remember how I ended up randomly following you on Instagram, but one of the reasons I invited you to the show is you're like just such a vibrant, radiant being. Just one of those people, like, you know, when you're doing sometimes it's mindful, sometimes it's mindless, like the scroll through social media. It's like whenever one of your posts pops up, I'm like, bam, it's like instant joy bomb, and I love it. And I love your big hair, and I'm just so excited to chat with you. For those of you who are listening, not watching, she has this magnificent, huge hair. So good. So, Abiola, first question I always ask all the women is, what do you love about being a woman?
Oh, yay. This is such a juicy conversation. First of all, thank you, Liz. I'm so excited to be here and be a part of your Untame Yourself mission. And I love that you said that I drop joy bombs, because my name Abiola means joy.
Of course it does.
And so that's pretty amazing. What do I love about being a woman? I love the fact that there is, for me, in womanhood, this feeling of, a connection going all the way back and all the way forward. And, from even just, if you think about it on a physical basis, the fact that when we're born, a girl child, we've got all the eggs you're going to make in your whole lifetime. And so my great grandmother had a seed of me, and a seed of the possibility of me in her life, and so it's really, really exciting just to know that we are a part of this continuum. I mean, we're amazing. It's the full moon. We are on the cycles of the moon and the tides, and like, how could we not be magical?
So magical. That thing you just shared, I don't remember where it was now, but I only learned that like a month or two. Like that, literally, really? I was in my grandma's belly technically, because the eggs were already in my mom. That blew my mind.
It is amazing. My great-great-grandmother in Guyana, where my family's from, Guyana in South America, she was a midwife and a women's fertility healer. And it's so cool to think that as she was like giving birth, like helping women to give birth to babies, like, like there I was, like a little kernel of me, like it's pretty cool.
It's super freaking cool. So before you and I hopped online, I brought something up because I just wanted to get it out there in the open. And I'm going to bring it up on air too, because I think it's really important. One of the things I love about having a podcast is being able to have these conversations with people that maybe it's just not a conversation someone has had or listened to before. So one of the things I said to you is I'm so excited to have this conversation with a Black woman about spirituality because there's so much I don't know. And I referenced back to one of our podcast episodes with Rashida Kanbe, where she opened up and she was like telling me about, the African diaspora and her trips to Brazil and all this stuff. And I'm like, that sounds amazing. But I also I don't want to turn you into a token and be like, so Abiola, you're Black. Tell me, I'm not trying to be offensive, but I am trying to educate myself and also give all the listeners and watchers an opportunity to be educated if they're unfamiliar. And also, for our women of color who are listening, have an opportunity to be like, yes, thank you for freaking including us in the fucking conversation. So yeah. Oh my God, I love you have, and I saw you had posted something about this on Instagram when, whenever, was it the Grammys or the Academy Awards where Beyonce did her epic performance, and she came out in goddess form. You have a deck of African goddesses. Can we please start there?
Yes. Well, first I want to just share with your audience what my reaction was when you said that. I was like, yay, hallelujah. Thanks for saying that. I am all about open, honest conversation. And I think that it's really important for us as women to be able to be straight up. I grew up in New York City. I went to a school on the Upper East Side. It was literally the Gossip Girl school where I was one of what we call the lonely onlys, and at that time, what it was you pretended not to see color. You pretended to be colorblind when obviously there's my big old chocolate self and my big old hair, and, for me, a big part of coming into my own was realizing that, because the idea of color blindness and being politically correct came from a place of people wanting to do the right thing, right? And wanting not to offend. But what it does is it negates you because, we are who we are. We're and I love who I am. I love everything about me. And so I don't want not to be seen. Yes. I don't want to be invisible. I don't want to be, glossed over. None of us is homogeneous. We come with, different cultural experiences. And, for me, even, being a part of, I'm a first generation American, my family wasn't born here. I have experiences that are very specific and very unique to that. And if we're unable, to have these conversations, then what's the friggin' point, man? Especially us in this community, as women, as goddess rising, to be able to be straight up and be like, hey, dude, I'm so glad you're here. I want to learn more about your culture. Coming from a place being genuine, to me, that is in no way offensive. And I don't see how it could be.
Yeah, well, every once in a while, people just are primed and ready and expect to be offended. So you never know. So we just throw it out there just in case. I love that you brought that up. That came up in a recent podcast episode as well, which I can't remember if it's going up before or after your episode, but my friend Rebecca Baruchi was on. And she's half Black, but she totally doesn't look like it at all. So she's had all the privilege of being treated just like a white woman. And we talked a lot about Bex? Bex, Bex.
Yeah, I've just Instagram. Yeah.
Oh no way,
love her.
She's so great. And that idea of color blindness, and I love that you brought that up because people, it's just a miss the mark type of thing, right? People who say all lives matter, or people who say I don't see color. It's you might have every intention of being helpful, but the point you just made, I think, is so important for others to hear and understand. It's no, actually, please don't blot me out and pretend not to see me because I am here and my experience is different. And that's the thing I love. My favorite question to ask people is, what is it like to be you? So I want to ask that question in a larger context, but also specific. So I'll start with specific. In this context of self-help, personal development, spirituality, and being a leader, you have a book, you write a column for Essence. What is it like to be you?
Okay, so I will answer this answering a part of your other question that I didn't answer about the African goddess affirmation.
Please feel free to reel me in. I get so excited. I jump around all over the place sometimes and go on tangents. All right, go ahead.
Women, we aren't, necessarily linear. We move in circles and cycles. So it's all good. So, what is it like to be me? Well, being that I haven't been anyone else, it's kind of hard to compare, or be like, all I can be is me. But a big part of what I find my personal mission to be is, I've moved past, the point of being like, well, why doesn't someone create this? Why don't we have that? And being the person that's like, I will create it. Cool. So with the African Goddess affirmation cards, I grew up learning about and studying about African deities and African goddesses, and everyone knows who Venus and Aphrodite are, but we don't know necessarily who Yemaya is and who Oshun, these Yoruba Orishas, goddesses. We don't know necessarily about, these goddesses. And so I created a deck of African goddess affirmation cards because I want to see goddesses who looked like me. Yes. I wanted to see myself reflected. And so, again, that it's like, to me, you're either a part of the solution or a part of the problem. And the way that you're a part of the solution is by answering your calling, whatever that may be. And so what it's like to be me at this point in time, I just feel really, it's interesting because, obviously, like with the political climate and political culture, like that, I just posted to my YouTube a video about like dealing with politics and spirituality and rage. Like what do you do like with that rage, with the feeling of, how do you balance staying informed and self-care and, all of those things that could literally drive you mad. Like every time you log on to Twitter or whatever, you're like, oh my God, like who did what now? You said what? Like It's just, you could drive yourself literally insane. But at the same time, like I feel really privileged and joyful about living in this present moment. The fact that you and I are able to have this conversation, across, state lines, cultural lines, like it really is magical. And I think we don't appreciate enough how powerful this present moment is. For me, I think that, I see the internet now, this, it may sound like really crazy to some people, but I see it really like as a major tool of our spiritual evolutionary consciousness. The fact that we are able to, for example, I have a retreat that is going to Bali in June called the Abundance, Pray, Love Retreat that I have planned with my dear friend Medina, who is an Australian healer. Here's the interesting thing. Medina and I have never met in person.
I love that.
I interviewed her like this for my podcast, the Spiritpreneur School podcast. We bonded, we spoke, we kept in contact. And I was like, I've been wanting to do a retreat. She'd wanted to do a retreat. And we are now co-planning a retreat to Bali. That couldn't have happened at any other point in time. And so, I think that it's really important that we, instead of we could get into a mode of just complaining how horrible everything is. Yeah. Or we could get about cleaning up our little piece of the block or our little piece of the world. Yeah. Whatever that, and so I feel really privileged, like I mentioned earlier, my great grandmother who was a midwife and, she was born in 1879 in Guyana and she helped women to give birth to their babies. And I say all the time that I'm doing her work. I'm helping women to give birth to ourselves. Yeah. Like it's just literally like an extension of that work. I love that. So, I think I'm pretty excited most days, I'm pretty happy about life for the most part.
That's awesome. So cool. I love this. I'd love to hear your opinion and what you shared in that YouTube video. And we'll also, you can send us the link. We'll put the link to the actual YouTube video in the show notes for this. But what did you say about the intersection with like the politics, spirituality, and rage? I love this conversation because, everyone comes from a different place on this. Earlier today, and again, they'll all post differently. I batch things, but I was interviewing Danielle Laporte, and we were talking about that, how for neither one of us does like the term like resistance. That doesn't really resonate for me, right? Like I'm not like hashtagging things resist, that's not my style. But I don't knock it or judge it for people who are. So yeah, where are you with all that stuff?
Yes. Well, I think, Liz, that is actually the first thing. Number one, be where you are. You don't, how do I put this? I think that a lot of us feel the need to jump on the bandwagon of something because, we're just pissed off. And so, for example, when the women's movement happened, which was amazing, for so many women, I didn't necessarily resonate with it, and neither did my sister. And so, I was cheering you on from the sidelines, like, yeah, do it. But, for me, it wasn't a part of my activism.
Yeah.
And only because, like, I think that, again, to be frank, I love that we started off this conversation talking about rage. Like, I think that I was really like kind of feeling pissed off at a lot of my white sisters, like when I learned that like 51% of white women voted for Donald Trump, it made me feel like literally like when I was on the phone with one of my friends, my best friends, who is also, Black, we were like, dude, like, I thought like we were all cool. Like, I thought, like we live in New York. So my friends encompass like a wide array of people. My friends look like everyone. But then it made me feel like, well, I don't know what the next person is thinking, because people lied and said that they were doing one thing and they were doing the other. So it was an interesting thing, it was a really, really interesting thing to be like, well, somebody lied. Is it my white friends who lied? I don't know.
Yeah.
Like somebody was lying about whatever, who they were voting for. And so it was an interesting thing. So I wasn't necessarily like, for me, it wasn't, I didn't feel like, okay, well, now I want to necessarily go out and march with you, because I didn't know where the hypocrisy was coming from. I don't know if the people I'm marching with are marching with me and, secretly voted for Donald Trump and now regret I don't know.
I never even thought of that. Like how many people might have actually like voted and then they're like, yay, Women's March. Man.
Yeah. And so, that is a really interesting thing. So, the first thing is, like you said, for example, resistance, isn't necessarily the way that you identify. We don't have to feel the need again to just, be like, okay, well, are you for us? Are you against us? Are you in this camp? Are you that camp? You can take it at your own pace, feel what you feel. And most importantly, find a healthy balance between like staying informed and your own self-care. You don't have to know every little thing. You don't have to, for the next 4 years, or however long, are you going to torture yourself by like being like, oh my God, they did this, they did that, they did, be conscious of the fact that, if you are, for example, if you're a mom and your activism is raising amazing kids, that can be enough.
Totally.
If you like this podcast, that can be enough. This is your resistance or your Women's March or your whatever it is, a few years ago, it was really funny. I was in this class in New York at this place called The Kitchen. That's a performing arts center. And Yoko Ono was a lecturer. She got up and she was totally like wacky and crazy. And it was interesting because, someone had asked her like about, like the wars that we're always in, like, how do we deal with that? How do you stay sane and blah, 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 blah. And she was like very Yoko. And she was like, go to your cabinet and mend your cup. And people were like, what the hell is he talking about? Like this woman has lost it. But I got what she was saying. She meant literally like clean up your stuff in your own life. Like that's how we do it. It's a micro movement, but everybody, some people are meant to march. Some people are meant to agitate. Some people are meant to run for office. If that's their calling, do your calling and be truthful for that. Be truthful to that and be rigorous about it and be committed to it and go all in, put everything into that. Don't be half-assed about it, but that's really important. And, also you can opt out of certain conversations. I have, conservative family members whom I love with my whole heart, but I've told them I'm not involved. I have no interest in talking to you about none. And they're like, no, but let's talk. No. Nope.
Boundaries, baby. That's like a big aspect of self-care. Like, I think a lot of times people think self-care is like, take a bubble bath, like treat yourself to a gorgeous meal, like go to a spa. It's like the most radical act of self-care is like friggin' having some boundaries, saying no when you mean no, saying yes when you mean yes, opting out of stuff that's not for you. I'm 100% with you there.
Yes, I call it emotional hygiene.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Like, no, thank you.
I really appreciate that, because I feel like this is something that a lot of people are in inquiry around. It's like, how do I personally do activism, right?
Yes.
And also, like, I love that you were also saying earlier, that's enough. This could be enough, right?
Yeah.
Just like show up for the thing that like you're super passionate about, and let that be enough until maybe it's not and you want to do more. And maybe you try on a couple different things. Like maybe you do play with that hashtag resistance, nevertheless she persisted, whatever it is. I actually really did like that one.
I love that.
I loved that one. You know, that was a really awesome story. But and then go, okay, you know, that is for me. Or, you know what, I'm going to hang that one up. Or I can't go in on all the stuff because then I'll exhaust myself. I also do need to take care of myself and, you know, be present in my own life. Just over this past weekend. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. No, I don't want to interrupt your story. Go ahead.
I interrupt people all the time. It's totally fine. You get all excited and that's what happens.
The other thing is we have to feel our feelings.
Totally.
You know, give yourself permission to feel your feelings. If it is anger, if it is rage, if it is sadness, if it's whatever, it may be a different feeling than someone else feels. And that's okay. Yeah. Because then that's when we move into needing to numb or avoid or, you know, participate in harmful behaviors if you are not feeling your feelings. Yeah. A lot of us get it twisted. We think that to be spiritual or be conscious or be aware means to, you know, you're happy, joy all the time. And that's not it at all.
It's a bypass, everyone. We talk about spiritual bypass on the podcast. That's a freaking bypass. No one is happy all the time. No one is positive all the time. It's just literally, unless you're like an enlightened, ascended being, which, you know, there's probably are some of those people on the planet, but I'm not one of them.
Maybe Amma is.
Yeah, that hugging. Maybe if I give people that many hugs, I might be ascended as well.
But I'm not there yet, and that's fine.
Yeah.
Be where you are and allow yourself to feel, you know, one day you may feel very angry. One day you may be fine with it. Maybe one day, you know, like allow yourself to be human and go through the range of emotions, you know? And then, you know, on a spiritual, for the part of the spiritual conversation, you know, I remember talking to another one of my friends the day after the election, and we were all kind of numb and in shock and like, you know, everything like that. And I think it was too soon for the conversation because I was like, you know, I was like, this is our shadow coming up to be healed. And she was like, basically like, F you, F him.
She's like, give me a couple days to just be pissed off.
Which is right, you know, and what I had said to her at that time, and I still believe firmly, I said, well, you know, for me, because I see the world, I see myself as an active participant. I don't ever view myself as a victim. And so for me, I have to look at where I have hate and negativity in my heart. Where am I putting out not necessarily, you know, the most beautiful light into the world? Again, we're all human, so we all have that. We all have unhealed places. We all have fear. You know, if you believe that what is going on right now is a big fear-based agenda and fear-based reaction, we all have fear. We all have ways that we manifest fear and put it out into the world. And so again, you know, thinking about yourself and you know what you've put out there and where you're judgmental. I'm judgmental toward people, you know, like where do you have maybe judgments or prejudices or things that you need to clean up? You know, because it's very easy to look at things that we see blatantly in the news very clearly, like when we see abuses of power, things that are despicable and disgusting. It's easy to look at that and point the finger and be like, these people, those people are vile. But not, you know, not you and I, not, you know, not the two of us. We are not that. But we all have, as human beings, everything within us.
All of it.
And so being unafraid to look at yourself in the raw and be like, okay, what do I personally need to clean up? You know, that's important too.
I love that so much. What I was going to say earlier is just this past weekend, I was writing the Wild Soul Woman Manifesto. And one of the lines in there is, you know it's not all about me, but it does start with me. Because I think that's a common misconception in this spiritual world or, you know, personal development or whatever, that some people are out there going, my activism is better than yours. And like, you're like, because some people, and I'm 100% with you, like, it does start with me. Like, I got to clean up my own shit before I think I can actually go help other people with theirs, right? Or like be cleaning it up as I'm helping other people. Because if I'm not looking at myself at all, that's actually not super helpful either, right? So, and I think some people are going like, but yeah, like, you're so self-centered, you're so self-involved. And yeah, I think there is a point at which it can become that way when people are like not even willing to acknowledge what else goes on in the world and other people's experiences. I think that kind of borders on like a little bit of like narcissism and like not helpful energy. But there's also the time where you really need to be like, how am I doing this? And, you brought up the topic of judgment. I'm trying to remember who I was having this conversation with. I feel like I was in the car with someone. I can't even remember who it was. But, maybe my friend Jen Blackstock, who's been on the podcast a couple times. But it's like, listen, goes back to what we were saying earlier. I'm not like an enlightened Buddha or anything like that. So yeah, I still judge people sometimes. And I think ultimately it's not about whether or not I judge. Like me trying not to judge is just like futile. It's going to happen. But like, what do I do with the judgment when it comes up? Like, am I making it useful? What do I do when I get angry? Am I trying to like channel that into something productive? Like I love having a podcast because when I get pissed off about something, I can be like, cool, who can I talk to about this? Who can I bring on the show? How can I start a conversation about this? Like we can actually do something about this, even if it's just creating some awareness or asking some deep questions and going places other people won't go,
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes, that's it exactly. And also, like when we're having those feelings again, to don't heap layers of judgment on judgment. I just recorded, this, I have something that's called the Manifest Your Magic Monthly Moon Circle. And so we have live digital sister circles on the new moon and record a podcast for the group on the full moon. And so I just recorded right before this call that full moon message. It's the pink moon at the time of this recording. And what I was talking about was shame. And how we then, feel, okay, well, now I'm ashamed for feeling ashamed.
Totally. Let me be angry with myself for being angry. Like, not helpful.
Don't do that. Allow yourself to just be your beautifully human, incredibly perfect in your imperfections, flawed, wonderful, lovely self.
And just be aware of like, just don't get stuck there, like
feel
your feelings, but like don't get stuck there. Notice when like the feeling or the emotion has actually run its course and you're the one choosing to like stay there or go back there or like rehash. It's a good one. So I'm super curious. You mentioned this also earlier. This is something I also love asking people. How are you staying informed right now? Because I noticed I've actually seen a couple of my friends posting on Facebook, like, where do you get your news from? Because there's a lot of super biased sources and places. I've been trying to get, do you know Elizabeth Cronus McLaughlin?
Yes.
I've been trying to get her on the podcast. I know she's just super freaking busy. She's someone who I trust. Like I will every couple weeks go see what she's posting, what she's talking about. Because I feel like, she is swayed a little more towards like my belief system. But still she seems to be presenting things that are coming from places that are, reliable,
a wider range,
and not like the quote unquote alternative facts. So how is it that you are staying informed right now?
So I do a combination of things. I'm very into the BBC news. And for a short period of time, I actually worked for BBC. I was a New York correspondent for BBC Radio. So I find that, their news tends to be a little bit more objective, no alternative facts.
Okay.
In fact, when I was recently in London, they had a whole campaign where they were laughing at us, about the whole alternative facts thing. So yeah, a combination of BBC News, and then with my social media, I have it like honed down, like where I follow the news sources that I want to know from. So, people talk a lot about, negative things coming in their timeline. And I'm like, well, who are you following? You're choosing your timeline, And so, if there are news sources that you like, follow them on your social media so that you are able to be informed by those sources. Or like you said, going to a specific person that you trust and being able to see them. And then I like to hear kind of like the lively discussions among women about what's going on. Yeah. So I started this actually in college. I tape The View and, I DVR it and then I watch it at night because, I like the conversation and it's interesting because like, for example, they have the correspondent Jedediah Bila. I don't know if you know who she is, but she's a conservative woman and it's good for me to like hear like, okay, here's someone who I can disagree with and not be like, you're a moron, but it's like, okay, okay, you're, because again, it's easy to get into otherness and think, okay, we you and I are this person and those other people, you know, and I don't want to do that. And so being able to see a woman who is a conservative woman and who I disagree with politically, but I could be like, I could see myself, you know, having a conversation with her and not feeling like, you know,
I'm like screaming at the TV like my dad watching a hockey game.
Right.
Yeah.
So I know that that's like corny, but I think it's like a holdover from, like I said, my college days. Like they were like, you know.
Listen, one of the things I do, I watch the Jimmy Fallon show, and I know he's always kind of talking about like the latest thing that came up, but if there's something that piques my interest or I want to know more about, then I'll go see like who's talking about it or where else. So like, again, I think you kind of really need to honor like what's your personality, how's it going to land for you. Like you're not going to find me combing like news websites. You're not going to find me actually watching the news. But I think to block it all out entirely, like my parents know I don't watch the news, but so whenever something like major goes on in the world, they call, they're like, I know you don't watch the news, so you need to know what this is going on. It's like, you're right, I don't watch the news, but I do stay informed by like staying connected with people who do. You know what I mean?
Yes.
It's almost like having translators. Like, let people interpret this shit that I don't want to watch. But I'm not like living here in Southern California in my freaking bubble, unaware of like other people, what's going on in their lives and in their world, you know?
Right. That's what it is exactly. And I think that everyone has to decide for themselves that I know that I can get like obsessed, you know? So I just opt out of like watching the news or, you know, going to be watching CNN or whatever, because then I'll fall into like a hole and be like, you know, so I, for my own well-being, like have to opt out of it. Like, for example, this is really funny. I haven't spoken about this publicly yet, but it's hilarious. Like after the election, like I was really pissed off at Susan Sarandon. And so I would randomly go to her Twitter like, okay, well, what does she have to say about this? And now they did that. What does she have to say about that? You know, and my sister was like, dude, like, oh, you have to like stop like going to her Twitter to like see it. I'm like, but she's not even saying anything and she has to take responsibility, blah, blah, blah. And, you know, funny. It's like, you can't. Like, it's just like, you know, like crazy making. Like yes.
You know, this is the most I've even talked about politics on the podcast, and I enjoy it. It's funny. I don't check our reviews and stuff like that very often, but like probably like a month or two ago, I went and I did see someone actually say they called it like a liberal feminist podcast, and I was like, wow, like I've never been assigned such labels before. But I mean, I guess if you look at it, like, yep, I'm really all about like all the humans having all the rights. And the uplifting of women, so she was kind of right. You know, I like that. I don't love the labels and I don't love the terms because I feel like there's a lot of negative connotation.
They box you,
But like, listen, people are going to label me. They're going to put me in boxes. I'm going to constantly be breaking out of the boxes and not taking on the labels myself. So call me whatever you want. Do your thing.
But even having this conversation, like I feel now like, okay, I have to sage myself. Like, you know, like I'm like, okay, you know, like, here's my crystals, here's my amethyst,
By the way, if anyone listening is like has no idea what that means, like saging yourself is just a way to like clear the energy in your space, just in case someone doesn't get that reference. But that's really I have one of my mentors makes this spray that's like energy clearing spray, so I do too. Like between things, I'm like spraying myself up, cutting my cords, and like listen, like you were talking earlier about emotional hygiene. We talk about energetic hygiene a lot, and like I have this video that teaches people how to like cut your cords and how to ground yourself.
So do I.
Yeah. Great. So you guys, you can go to untameyourself.com/energy if you want that video. Do you have a link for yours?
Yes, I will give you I will give it to you, and you can put it in the show notes.
Cool.
Yes.
Great. I love teaching people that stuff because really this is one of the greatest self-cares, right? Like energetic hygiene. And so, you know, for anyone listening, and I even say this in that video, like you wouldn't go 4 days without brushing your teeth. Like imagine the state of your mouth if you literally didn't brush your teeth for 4 days. Well, we're not clearing out our energy fields unless you know all about that stuff. So imagine going like your whole life without clearing out your energy fields. All the gunk, all the things that you pick up, you like on the street or having conversations with negative people or whatever. So like that kind of like clearing out what comes into your space energetically, just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not hanging around funking up the space.
Yes, exactly. And actually in my last book, I also have like a detailed like decording process.
Cool.
And actually the gift that I'm going to give your audience has all is a meditation album that also has, I believe it has a decording meditation
Cool.
on that album as well.
I
Yeah.
love that. Quick break in the show to let you know our new Wild Soul Woman manifesto is up, and you can find it at wildsoulmovement.com/pledge. Not only did we post the manifesto, but we turned it into a pledge. You can enter your name and email, and we'll send you a beautifully designed printable PDF so that you can put the pledge somewhere in your sacred space, whether it's the bathroom mirror, on your altar, in your journal, on your refrigerator, somewhere where you can hang it up or hold it up and be inspired by it. Here's what women in our community are already saying about it. This is deep and loving and courageous and fierce. I love it. Makes me feel like I'm standing in my power, brave, courageous, and strong. And yet it's not a choice, but more of an inherent way of being. Inspired and empowered, and that is something I want to read and reread until it sticks. Someone asked if it could be a poster, which is one of the reasons why we made a printable PDF. So go ahead and head on over to wildsoulmovement.com/pledge and get your printable version of the Wild Soul Woman Manifesto stat. Back to the show. So how'd you get into this? It sounds like there was some influence from your great grandma who was a midwife. But what made you, and you mentioned you used to be like a correspondent for BBC, what made you decide to take your career and go, I'm going down this path, I'm going full spirit, I call it like full spiritual, we're doing this thing.
Full spirit ahead.
Yeah, totally.
Well, my dad is a minister.
Mm-hmm.
And my mom was a teacher in Guyana, and then she worked in educational administration here. And so I feel like the work that I do is really a combination of all of their work.
Cool.
You know, all of everything that they're doing, like, you know, manifested through my eyes and my life.
Mm.
And so what's really cool is that my dad is like a very open-minded minister. He's not like your typical, like, you know, what people would think of as like, you know, Black minister. My dad, like last year, he studied the Kabbalah, you know, and
Cool.
when I was a kid, like he was doing yoga and things like that. And so, you know, being very conscious of, you know, whatever words people put toward, you know, being I guess a student of world global spirituality is very much just a part of my heritage. Guyana, the country where my parents come from, you know, has a large Hindu population. And so learning about that goddess culture, all of those things were, you know, just a part of my consciousness growing up. I grew up in a house with altars, you know, I grew up with all of this stuff. And a lot of it was very embarrassing to me for a long time because as a kid, you just want to fit in. And so I remember being a kid and my dad having this huge altar. My parents had this huge altar in the dining room. You know, it was like a huge, like, and that was like, so embarrassing, you know, or that people had to take off their shoes when they came into, you know, my parents' house when I was like all of those things that were so humiliating when I was a kid, you know, as I got older, you know, were just so rooted in who I am.
Yeah. And
so the beautiful thing is that I was self-improvement or whatever you call, you know, this work, you know, self-help. It became, I started to learn about it at a young age because my dad, I remember when I was in high school, he went to a conference that Zig Ziglar was speaking at, a motivational speaker. Yeah. And so he brought home the paperwork from that. And he was like, you know, here, you know, take a look at that. And it started to just blow my mind. Like the first time that like you hear any of these things, like it blows your consciousness like wide open. And so, you know, that for me was a big part of the beginning of this journey for me, you know. That's and cool. So for a long time, it had been like just kind of like riding between both and like, you know, being in the spiritual closet, so to speak. Yeah. You know, and me being able to be more comfortable with who I am, you know, meant me answering my calling to not think that, okay, I had to, you know, kind of hide a part of myself. You know,
it's really interesting the thing you bring up about the altar. So I have an altar in my bedroom. And it's my favorite altar I've ever had. It's essentially like a whole coffee table that I've covered with like all my sacred objects, like all kinds of things. And when my parents came to visit, they came to visit me for the first time. I remember actually it crossed my mind, like, should I just like clear off the altar so I don't even have to do it? Because I was raised Catholic. Like I wasn't, my family is like pretty traditional Christian religion. And I remember thinking, no, like this is who I am. And if they're going to have a problem with it, great. Then we're going to have a conversation about it and like we're all going to be fine. Like cool thing about my parents, like would they prefer that I've like kept to their tradition? Sure. But are they like the type of people to disown me because I haven't? Absolutely not. Like we can agree to disagree. It's taken a while, but we can agree to disagree peacefully. And so something really cool happened. I feel like I might have told this story before on the podcast, but I'll tell it again. My parents, they spent the night and my mom was like taking off her jewelry and she like yells downstairs to me. She's like, hey, this looks like an altar. Should I put my jewelry on it or should I not put anything on it? And I was like, damn. I'm like, thank you for asking. No, please don't put anything on the altar. And it was just like, you know what? I wasn't expecting her to like respect it.
Yeah.
And she totally did. And it was so cool. You know, meanwhile, the next day, my dad's like hanging shit up, putting the hammer on my altar, putting the measuring tape on the altar. And I'm like, yo, Dad, like, don't put anything on the altar. And he's like, still putting things on the altar. So I don't know if that was as much of like a lack of respect or more of like an obliviousness, but it was actually pretty funny, the contrasting experiences. Yes. But yeah. And also too, like I had people over on New Year's and some of them were like newer friends and they had like gone up and they were in my room because my place is lofted. And one of them gets up there and he's like, oh, look at all this hippie stuff up here. And I'm like, you know, like some people get it, some people don't. Everyone's reaction is different. But above all things, I'm super not into hiding or pretending I'm not who and what I am, you know?
Yeah. And it's a real unfolding. I love that story about your parents and your dad. I think he just didn't know.
I don't think he knew. He just like was not,
You know, because I had friends visit also who, you know, like for example, I have a piece of wood from Guyana from, you know, my mother's childhood home that I brought back with me. And I remember I was filming something in my apartment and my friend, you know, needed to balance the camera on something and she took like, I was like, and she was like, oh man, you can't touch anything in your house. And I'm like, oh no, that's my altar. And that's my altar. You just took a piece of like my mom's childhood home, like, from it to like,
of course, like how the hell would she know that? But at the same time, it's very funny.
You know, and even like, you know, a few months ago with my Facebook sister circle that I have, one of my cousins, who I'm not close to, but who follows me on Facebook, you know, sent a request to join the Facebook sister circle where we talk specifically about this, about energy and altars and, you know, unblocking yourself and manifesting. And I was like, oh my God, like, what's she gonna do? Like, you know, like, I didn't know, like, okay, is she gonna feel uncomfortable? Am I gonna feel? And you know, I was like, ultimately, like, all right, well, I'll accept her request, and either she'll feel comfortable, or she'll go, or she'll ask questions, and either way, it'll be fine.
Yeah, that's cool. So I'm curious. Once you let her in, did you feel any level of self-consciousness knowing she was in there?
Yeah, I did.
How'd you deal with that?
I did. The interesting thing is she's never commented or participated in the circle at all. So maybe it was once she got in there, she was like, whoa, you know, this is, but maybe not, you know, maybe, you know, I don't know. And so the way that I dealt with that, because I did feel like, you know, the like immediately, like afterward, you know, I was like, oh my God, you know, like, what's she going to think? I think that I was just like, you know, I'm big into being present and feeling your feelings. And so it was like, okay, right now I feel a little bit awkward. I feel a little, you know, uncomfortable, but then it's like, okay, I just have to be me. And you have just requested to step into my world. And so this is how we do things in my world. And so either you're with it or you're not, but I'm going to be me. Like I didn't censor myself because of the discomfort.
I love that.
You know?
Yeah. Because you were like, you actually requested to come into my house. This is a form of my house. And so I run the show here and like whatever happens. Cool. I love that. So if someone is interested, you know, for whatever reason in learning more, I think your deck sounds like a good place to start with the African goddesses. Are there any other books? Like, you know, obviously there's always the good old reliable Google, but do you have any favorites? Like, so for example, a book I recommend like a gajillion times, people have heard me say it, is when people want to get into like the archetypes and like the Hindu goddesses of yoga, I always recommend Awakening Shakti by Sally Kempton. Are there any books, like if people want to know the African goddesses, is there a book or is your deck the best place to go?
I think the African Goddess Affirmation card deck, you know, that's a great place. I'm going to pull a card for us before we go.
Do it.
So that's a great place to go. In my last book, The Sacred Bombshell Handbook of Self-Love, you know, I talk a lot about these practices and about the fact that, you know, we all grew up with people saying, just love yourself, but we didn't know how. And a lot of times they didn't know how. And so, you know, talking about like how to do that, like that for me, I specifically wrote this book to be a teaching tool, to have exercises and practices that people could do. And so I think that is like a big place to go. But the cool thing about the African Goddess Affirmation cards is that on each card, I have a lesson at the bottom. So it's not like just an affirmation. Like I specifically have like, okay, you know, here's the lesson that's associated with this goddess. So that's a really, really cool way to go.
Neat. And actually, and I'd love, because you had written this post on Instagram. So for anyone who doesn't know, for anyone who just thought that like Beyonce's performance was like super epic, can you tell us about the goddess that she was representing?
Yes. Now, Beyonce, the cool thing is that in her performances, she has represented a number of different African deities. So I don't remember if that specific one was, I remember specifically that she, in one performance, represented the goddess Yemaya, and in another one, she represented the goddess Oshun.
It was Oshun.
Now, so both Oshun and Yemaya are West African deities from the Yoruba culture. My name, Abiola, like I was saying, it means joy. It means it's a Yoruba name.
Cool.
And so although my family is from Guyana, Yoruba culture is still very strong in West African culture because that's where the slaves were brought from originally, from the coast of West Africa. And so these goddesses are hidden. Oshun, you can find Oshun and Yemaya throughout Brazilian culture, hidden in the saints, you know, hidden in, you know, like in cultures like in New Orleans, like where there's like big like saint culture, you know, and Brazil, like it's the African goddesses that because they, you know, had to give up their deities, they hid them, you know, in the saints, hid them in folklore. Cool. And so goddess Oshun is the goddess of beauty and fertility. You know, she is the sister of like Venus and Aphrodite, you know, so to speak. And her, the thing where she has a fan and she has a jar of honey, you know, so those are some of the ways if you're wanting to acknowledge Oshun, you know, you could have some honey out, you know, some pumpkin, you know, and, you know, revel in your beauty. You know, I call it beauty as a spiritual practice, you know, and I wrote like a whole chapter about it in the Sacred Bombshell Handbook, because I think that, you know, there's something really powerful about acknowledging your beauty, acknowledging your, you know, and a lot of us were taught, you know, we grew up, a lot of us who are women in our, you know, 20s, 30s, 40s, you know, we grew up with knowing, yes, you're totally equal to boys, but a lot of that was about denying our femininity at the same time.
Totally.
And so your beauty or your, you know, anything that was, you know, feminine, like you kind of had to stuff down.
Totally.
You know? And so acknowledging your beauty, acknowledging your femininity, acknowledging, you know, these things about yourself can be a part of your spiritual practice.
I love that. So I'm super curious, is there any path? Are you studying anything right now? Are you reading anything right now? I'm always really curious, like where there's sometimes a gap between like what I'm sharing with people and what I'm actually doing in my own life. You know, like what are you geeking out on right now?
I am geeking out on money. It's really, really interesting. I'm geeking out on the spirituality of money. Cool. And so I've been talking a lot about money and abundance. And I just interviewed Jen Sincero. Here's her newest book. She wrote You Are Badass.
Yeah.
And you probably have had her on. If not, you should.
I haven't. She's been on my list for a while.
Okay, this is her new book, You Are a Badass at Making Money.
Cool.
And so, um, like a lot of people in our community, like I had, in the past, like a lot of shame around money and a lot of, issues around abundance and the thought of like money, people with money were this and people with money were that. And what was a big shift for me was hearing Marianne Williamson say that it's not only okay if you are a light worker, change maker to make money. It's not just okay, but we have a duty to be wealthy. We have a duty to be abundant. We have a duty to, allow abundance into our lives. And so, for the past year and a half, that has been a big part of my teachings. And this summer, I'm going to be also launching a money course. Cool. I've been like totally geeking out about, spirituality, money, manifesting, allowing, not coming to the ocean with a thimble or being like, well, if I just had just enough, realizing like, the power of opening your arms and welcoming abundance into your life. And that has been so freeing.
It's super freeing. And that's a conversation. We have money conversations on the podcast all the time too, because that's a spiritual path, like relationship to money, like mega spiritual path, like people, their upbringing, your family, your lineage, like where you got all your ideas about it. And, one of the things I find so fascinating is it doesn't matter whether you grew up with money or without it. People who did both have very similar issues sometimes. Yeah. Or it's different issues manifesting in different contexts, or like so fascinating. Actually, I run a mentorship, and it's so interesting to me how one of the things that comes up for people a lot is credentials and money. It's like what they think they need to be like certified in, or like how much education they need to have, or whose endorsement they need to have, or like how many years they need to have put in to be valuable enough to even ask people for money. And there's certainly a level of responsibility to like hone your craft and be good at what you do, and like not be irresponsible, in your own life, and be congruent and things like that. But it's super interesting. I was re-listening to one of my, with Amelia Symington Fetty, where we were talking about like entrepreneurs, like what they actually charge for their services, like coaches and stuff like that. Cause that's like a whole other conversation. We'll have you back to talk about money specifically. Yes.
Oh my God. I love this conversation. Cool. Yes. Yeah, we have to get together and talk about that again.
We'll totally do it.
Yes. Yes. Great. I want to recommend another book before we go. It's
girl, we are geeks. We love all the books.
Yes. Oh my God. Okay. So this is a book by Iyanla Vanzant. This is from a long time ago. This is One Day My Soul Just Opened Up. And Iyanla, was one of my first spiritual teachers through her books. Like, she is awesome. This one is The Value in the Valley. Mm-hmm. And these books are really, really good about like really helpful for, if you are having challenges with being an empath. Yep. And, not knowing boundaries, not knowing how to ground yourself, that she does great teachings around that. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. I've heard her name many times, and I feel like I've looked at her stuff a couple of times and I always forget, but she sounds like a total badass. So I'll check that out.
She is a badass.
Cool. Oh, Abiola, I'm so glad. Like, I feel like connecting with you and getting to have a conversation is like exactly what I would have hoped or thought it would have been like based on looking at your pictures on Instagram. And like nothing makes me happier than when someone is exactly who I thought they were going to be.
Yay!
Thank you so much. We're going to link up. We'll make sure we get links to all the things and send people. You said you were going to pull us a card. Can we do that before we go?
Okay. Yes. Okay, so I'm going to pull a card. Actually, I'm feeling to pull a card from the womanifesting goddess affirmation deck.
Trust you.
And these are fertility goddesses, because I believe that, we as women are fertile whether we ever give birth to a child or not, and so, we are fertile in our creations and the things that we put out into the world. This was a very fertile, juicy conversation. And so, like I talked about, my midwife, great grandmother, and as a self-worth midwife, I created the fertility goddess affirmation deck that has global fertility goddesses. Okay. So pick a number between 1 and 7.
5.
Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, let's see. All right, so we pulled the goddess Sawatara, who is the goddess of forgiveness. And the affirmation here, very interesting, is I forgive others as I forgive myself.
Love that.
I forgive others as I forgive myself.
That's awesome.
So I think that that's a good, and then on the back it says, ask, believe, conceive.
Cool.
Yes.
Forgiveness is also another hot topic in the wild soul work. So perfectly apropos.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Is there anything I didn't ask you that before we log off you like or would love to share? Wish I would have asked you anything? And by the way, if the answer is no, that's totally cool.
Yeah, I think that this was like just such a juicy and inspiring conversation. I'm excited to know you. I'm so happy now that we are connected.
Yes.
I'm forward to, having you on the Spiritpreneur School podcast as
Sign
well.
me up. I'm in.
Yes. And so, you're going to put all of the links to everything,
Yep.
but, a free gift. That's right. I have a free gift for you people.
Yay,
I
we love
forgot.
free gifts.
Yes. So the Untame Yourself Tribe, I have the Chakras on Fleek meditation album, which is free. Yes. Chakras on Fleek.
I love the name so much. Cool.
And so they could go to chakrasonfleek.com, and to access it, the free code is Life Loves Me.
Cool.
So the way that you put in the coupon code Life Loves Me to be able to download it for free.
Awesome. And again, we'll put that in the show notes
Yep.
too. So amazing. Thank you so much. Loved having your vibrant energy here. Like, I have other things to do for the rest of the day, and I have just been fueled and recharged by you. So thank you so much. This was a blast. Thank you for going there with me on some of the topics we don't always talk about. So great to meet you. Thank you so much. And as always, we are continuing the conversation in the Facebook group. So if anything came up for you, you want to share anything, you can always come and do that at untameyourself.com/Facebook. So Abiola, you are great. I feel like I've known you forever. And we will now, next up, I got to meet you in real life. We'll figure out how to make that happen. So thank you again. We'll see you later.
Okay, my sister.
I think there's lots of things I said I was grateful for, and I should have just, punched him in the face. Thanks for the lesson. Well, I was in a long-term relationship, and I put up with a lot of stuff that wasn't good for me, wasn't good for him either. And wasn't that I was trying to be grateful for it. I was just trying to be a more loving, I was just trying to be a more spiritual person in a relationship that was really unhealthy.
Yeah.
And that qualifies because that was 15 years.
Yeah.
And yeah.
I can certainly relate to that one. I feel like my biggest one in the last few years was the thing I used as the bypass was compassion. Like, my discernment would come up. Like, the spidey senses would go off. The things in my body would be screaming no. And I'd be like, I should be more open. I should be more accepting here. Everyone's on their journey.
Exactly.